morning. We're waking up to some snow out here in the high desert this morning. We just got back a few days ago to this property, and sure enough, a couple days later, we're getting some snow. I do notice that it tends to be very unpredictable when these snow events happen out here. This is probably the second, maybe third one that I've experienced since we got out here a year ago. They don't happen too often. This is probably one of the bigger ones that they've had all season. But when they do come, there's very little warning. You'll look at, the forecast and it'll say there's going to be maybe an inch of snow throughout the night. And then all night long last night, we had blizzard conditions, 45-mile-an-hour winds whipping all around. I was up most of the night listening to that. I'm sure you can hear some of the wind right now. It is still going a bit this morning. And sure enough, we woke up this morning to a lot more snow than an inch, I'll tell you that much. So I figure this is a good chance to talk a little bit about what we do to make sure that we're prepared while living off-grid like this in the middle of the desert for when these snow events do happen. I think probably the most important thing in terms of being off-grid like this and being ready for when the weather goes south is having a heat source. We've noticed, right now there are two structures off-grid on this property. There's the tiny house that is mostly finished to my left, and then to my right I have the cabin, the 400 square foot cabin that was put here by the previous owner. Inside that cabin there is a wood stove, which has saved us a number of times. We used that wood stove when we first got out here because we literally had no other heat source at the time, and now we've learned that it is helpful to have a backup heat source as well. We do have a small Mr. Buddy heater, a propane heater that we can use in a pinch, but most of the time we're relying on that wood stove. And one thing that we have noticed is that using a wood stove does require some preparation and some forethoughts. You kind of have to make sure that you have wood inside the cabin. We stack it up neatly in a little container, and that way it can get nice and dry, and then it's ready to be put into the wood stove when we need it so that it can provide us heat. If it's wet and we leave it outside and we go try to pull it from one of these piles over here with a bunch of snow on it, it's not going to light so easily. There's other things too. You got to clean the wood stove. We cleaned the chimney last fall in preparation for the winter, and thank goodness we did that because we got back out here, and 2 days later, before we had any time to do any kind of maintenance, we're getting snow like this in really cold weather. Another point, we are relatively remote out here off-grid, and driving and transportation can be kind of challenging when conditions unpredictably turn into a winter storm like this. And I learned that the hard way last night. I went into town. I decided to run to Albuquerque to do some errands yesterday, and like I said, the forecast kind of said that we're going to get like maybe an inch or so of snow, so I wasn't too worried about it. I didn't think twice about it. But sure enough, as I started coming back yesterday evening, I experienced probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had driving in the snow. And I am no stranger to driving in the snow. I grew up in New England. I literally learned how to drive my first car in snowy conditions, so I'm pretty used to it. But at the same time, it was pretty crazy. And I think part of that is just because these roads out here, as you get rural and away from the city centers, they're the last ones to get maintained. Those trucks, the plows, and the sand treatment, that doesn't happen out here for a while. So I was just going down and it was just completely unplowed, and it was a little bit sketchy climbing up over 1,000 feet of elevation and going around all the turns and the bends and into the mountains. Was kind of scary. So something to think about when you're out here and you're remote and conditions get bad. It can be challenging. In addition to that, our road is a dirt road, and it's completely unmaintained. It never gets plowed or anything like that. So when there's a lot of snow, it can get to the point where it's almost impassable. Heck, even after the snow starts to melt, it gets so slippery and muddy that it's really difficult to go up and down it. Recently, we have been having a few issues with power. Like I said, we just got back out here a couple of days ago, and I have not been able to fix the power system in the tiny house that went down on us while we were away from the property. So right now, all we have is a solar generator, a Blue Eddy, that has been working really well, but it has such a small capacity that when you get a few days of cloudy weather in a row like we've had and like we're going to continue to have, we're sort of in a position where we just don't have really any power at all. We can barely keep our fridge running and our cell booster going, and then on top of that, Shannon's working remotely, so she has to be able to charge her laptop, and then that's really all that we can really do for the most part. So what we do fortunately have is a generator. We do fire up that gas generator when it gets cloudy like this, and that's what has saved us, fortunately. But at the same time, we are 30 minutes away from the closest gas station, so it can be kind of a challenge to go and get gas to refill, especially if the roads are covered in snow and it's difficult to drive. Of course, I do want to fix the solar system in the tiny house. That's a top priority. And then we're also going to be installing a very large solar setup in the cabin as well, which should allow us to stretch through those cloudy days and just have enough power to get through them. And then once the sun comes back out, to fill everything back up and not have any problems. But that being said, we are waiting for quite a few parts. I ordered some parts to try to troubleshoot and fix the issues, and they just haven't come yet. We're waiting for them from UPS, which I guess brings me to the next point. You know, just being out here requires patience. It takes longer for things to get out here in general. You know, if we order something online, you know, whereas it might be 2 or 3 day delivery for somebody who's in an urban area, for us, it could take a week or two for it to get out to us. And then when conditions go south, it makes this road, like I said, relatively impassable, and delivery vehicles will just not come down here. FedEx and UPS, and then other delivery services like water. A lot of folks have water hauled to them, and that sort of thing gets suspended as well, even for a few days after the snow event, simply because the road is just too muddy. So just being patient out here, I think, is something that we have learned. You just kind of have to wait for this snow to melt and for things to dry out. There's not a whole lot else that you can do. So I just want to take a second to interrupt. I am editing this video right now, and I noticed as I was filming this video, that jacket that I have on still has the tag on it, and it's like sticking out in a lot of shots, and I just thought it looked kind of ridiculous and really funny. So I just wanted to point it out in case anybody hadn't noticed it yet. That is a brand new jacket. Shannon got that for me for Christmas. Really nice Christmas gift. I'm really grateful for it. It's really, really nice. But that's the first time that I had worn it. Thought it was kind of funny. It gets really obvious in the next couple of shots. The tag is like literally just sticking out the whole time, but I gotta take that thing off. Another thing that gets impacted when the temperature drops below freezing and it gets snowy like this is our plumbing. We actually do have a little bit of plumbing in the tiny house now. There is a shower with a hot water heater and a sink in there. But what happens is these lines freeze. This is something that is definitely a priority for us to deal with once the weather warms up a bit. We want to bury these lines and improve this skirting around the tiny house to try to keep them as warm as possible so that water can flow even when the temperature gets cold. But for now, we just aren't going to have any showers out here in the wintertime. We had the sun poking through for a little while there. Snow even started to melt in a few spots, but the snow has started up again. It was in the forecast. We're supposed to get at least a little bit more tonight and even into tomorrow morning. We'll see how it goes. It's definitely not all bad though. Not all challenges. Snow events like this are pretty rare. Like I've already said, precipitation in general out here in the desert is relatively rare. We've definitely heard some stories from some of our neighbors who have been out here for like 30 or more years, and they've said that a couple of times there have been blizzards, like real blizzards, where they've got a foot or even 2 feet of snow, and that can definitely wreak havoc. Really, any amount of snow can cause problems out here if you're not prepared for it. So hope this video was helpful for some of you guys that maybe are considering moving off-grid to a harsh environment like this at high elevation. Like I said, it's pretty unpredictable. It is beautiful though. There's really few things, in my opinion, as pretty as snow in the desert. It's kind of surreal to see it all on the cacti. Kind of gets me every time, even though I've seen this now quite a few times. It's pretty neat. And then another benefit, you don't have to really shovel at all out here. Where I grew up in New England, I was shoveling all the time, but out here, it mostly just melts. Within a few days, things are going to clear up. It's going to get warmer. The road will still be wet and muddy, but after a few days from there, it'll dry up and things will be back to normal. So you might have to wipe off the snow on your deck or maybe on your solar panels for basic maintenance, but certainly aren't going to be shoveling our quarter-mile long driveway anytime soon. I'm looking forward to the warm weather, though. I'm definitely a southerner at this point, or at least I've kind of transitioned into one over my years living in New Orleans and then living in Florida, and just being on the road and kind of avoiding cold weather like the plague. That's usually how I've always worked. So looking forward to the hot days of summer out here and getting that first taste of spring. Can't thank you all enough for watching and for following along on this journey. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.